So this is how to master your squats. Squats are a really important exercise, so we need to make sure that we are doing every single one of the steps in the right way so we don't get injured or we don't risk injuries. So step number 1 is bar height, the barbell height. So essentially we want the barbell to be at around shoulder height and just below the shoulder. So for me it's right about my sternum height. So we don't want the barbell to be super high, so that when it's time for us to get underneath the barbell, we're like this, because that's not going to be optimal. We're going to be it's going to be dangerous for us tipping over and etc. Nor we don't want to do this. We don't want to be right here and exert big amounts of force to get to unrack the barbell. So just make sure that is right about the sternum or underneath the shoulder, so it is a smooth unrack. Now step number 2 is hand placement. So we got the barbell height check, then we need to make sure that we are ready to go underneath the barbell. Our hands need to be in an optimal position. What does that mean? What does an optimal position look like? The hand placement needs to be as close to each other as possible, but without causing any elbow or shoulder issues. Let me explain on this, and I will get through the steps step by step, but I will, let me elaborate on this one. So essentially, you want it to be as tight as possible, as close to each other as possible, without it being too close to each other. What is this? So we get underneath the barbell. Now, if I were to do my hands like this, come a little closer. So if I were to be having my hands that close to each other, and I try to go underneath the barbell, that's not possible. My elbows are gonna crack. So if I were to be right here, this is not tight at all. I can round my back, especially my upper back. It's not gonna be conducive to keeping my upper back as tight as possible. So what I wanna do is something in between, which is something like this for me. You can play around and see what works for you. Obviously I've squatted thousands of times, so I know what works for me. So it is somewhere around in the middle of super wide and super tight, somewhere right here. So we got this out of the way. The next thing is, step number 3, is placement of the barbell on our back, which we want it to be on the trapezius muscles, the traps. We don't want it to be on our neck. We don't want it to be super low. We want to have you have like a small cushion in your back. So you want to find a good position where you can maintain that tightness, but also not cause any issues on your neck. And yeah, so we go underneath the barbell. We have hand placement and bar height checked in. So many people do this. Place their barbells on their necks, on the neck bones. We don't want to do that. So what we want to do instead is place the barbell on top of our trap muscles, like this. So you will know when you have found the right spot by actually testing the barbell. It's going to be pretty stable, and you're not going to be having as much pain as if you were to put it in the wrong position. However, when you're first starting to do squats without the pad especially, it is going to be quite uncomfortable, especially in the beginning. But as you get used to that, your back muscles become tighter and tighter and stronger essentially and stiffer, so it's not going to be causing you as much issues as when in the beginning. The next step is the unrack. When we get underneath the barbell and we're ready to unlock the barbell and start squatting. So we have our hand placement, we have everything mentioned before checked, and now the next thing is the barbell on the back, and we are ready to unrack. How do we unrack? The only thing that you need to do is contract your glutes. You're here. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do this like many people do. You just want to contract your glutes, and the bar will automatically unrack, essentially. Let's see how that looks like. So both legs, just like we're about to squat, underneath the barbell, everything is tight, everything is correct, and then we contract our glutes, and the barbell is lifted. Now the next step is to take the few steps to go and prepare for squat. this should look like something like this. One medium step, one bigger step, and then the last small step to adjust and meet the two fit together. Let's see that at one at a time from a closer look. So it should look like something like this. One medium step, which with whatever leg, with whatever foot you want. One larger step, and then the last step is to meet the other one. This is how it should look like. Now, the next step, of course, once we are here and set to go, is to learn what should we do before we start descending. So the movement, of course, should look like something like this, right? But it's not that simple. So let's say we have taken the few steps to go like back like we normally should. We have our barbell in our backs, on our backs, and the next thing is to learn how to brace our core. Now this is a key part when it comes to every single one of the compound movements, and it is bracing the core correctly. Otherwise, we will create instability. We need to create a 360 belt with our muscles on the core with the stabilizers, lower back, abs, etc. to make sure that our core is as tight as possible. How do we do that? By inhaling through our diaphragm, with taking a big breath in through our mouth and not our noses. So let's elaborate on the breath a little bit more with the barbell on our back. Let's say we're taking our steps backwards. I'm just saying taking forward steps just to elaborate. So what we want to do is not this. We don't want to do this. We want to take as big of a breath as possible through our mouth and fill our belly, our lower back. Essentially do a 360 feel on our core. So it will look something like this. And then we create as much tension as possible. Now the good way to think about this is, if I were to come and give you a big punch on your belly, this is exactly what you want to do. So you fill the breath 360, not only filling the belly with air, but you want to be expanding your core 360, like you were wearing a belt, and you want to make the belt explode just from your core, right? So do this and then hold that tension as you're descending. So it will look something like this. You see, I'm taking my breath and I'm holding the tension. I'm not letting go. I did not do the classical thing you might be hearing from here and there like this. You don't want to do this. This is breaking tension. You're not remaining tight. Your core is breaking tension. You're loose. Your lower back is unprotected. So you want to hold that tension. You want to think about it like someone is coming to punch you in your stomach throughout the whole movement. So this is how you want to think about it. The next step after the breath is our elbows. Now before we start descending and before we start the movement, we need to make sure that every box is checked, sticked, okay? So the next step after we take the breath is tuck the elbows in. We don't want our elbows to be flaring out like this. We don't want them to be like relaxed here. We want them to be tucked in like this. We want them to be in alignment to our lats, essentially. We want them as close as possible to our ribs. This creates tension on the upper back and makes sure that we are tight throughout the whole movement. So normally it should look something like this. Breath, tucking the elbows, tightening off the core, making our core tight, creating tension, and then starting to descend. So again, after we've done everything, there is another step, which is our pelvis. So we need to make sure that our butt is not like this, like you see many people tell you. We should have a neutral spine. We should have a neutral pelvis. It should look something like, not like this, not like this, it should, something in the middle, right? So the way you want to think about this is as follows. You want to think of it as if both of your pelvics, both of your hips, the bones in your hips are like arrows, right? If you're over like this, if you're tucking your butt too much inwards, these arrows are looking upwards. If you do the opposite thing, these arrows are pointing downwards. So you want these arrows to be pointing neutral, straightforward, right? So it should look something like this. You want your butt tucked inwards, but not too much. Not like this, not like this. You want your lower back and pelvis to be neutral. So like this, right? So let me elaborate. Here, everything tucked, breath is tight. So again, come a bit closer. So what you want to do is this, right? Not this too much, not too much back. We want neutral pelvis, like this, this, this. So essentially you want your hips you want your glutes to be flexed a bit, and then you can achieve that really nicely. So the next step, before we start descending, there are always next steps. Our feet, this is a pretty basic one, right? So you want your feet not to be like this, super parallel to each other. You don't want them like this. You want them somewhere in the middle. You want them to be pointing a bit towards the outside, so a bit like this. And you want your feet to be drilling the ground. Let me elaborate on this a bit more in detail, because that's a bit tricky. So before you start descending, you want your feet to be, so your three points of contact should be the big toe, the small toe, and your heel, okay? So you want your foot to be like a tripod, okay? And you also, before you start descending, you want to do this. You see my knees here? You want to do this. So what this does is you're drilling your feet on the ground like this. And this engages your glutes and makes sure that you are powerful throughout the whole movement. So you're here. What you want to do is make sure that your feet are about shoulder width, like this. Not too open, not too narrow. You want them about shoulder width, a bit more wide, preferably. You're going to be playing around and you're going to be sticking with the movement and the placement that feels the most natural, pain-free, and you feel the most powerful. So feet are going to be slightly pointing outwards. Before you start descending, not right from the get-go, you want to make sure to do the exact thing that I told you to do, to drill your feet on the ground by touching the three main points like a tripod, which is the big toe, small toe, and the heel, and then you start the next part of the movement. So after we've ticked all the boxes till now, which is elbows, placement on the back, feet are nice and pointing slightly outwards, we're drilling our feet on the ground, and we're making sure that the three main points are in contact with the ground. Then what we do is drill the feet on the ground, make sure that our pelvis is neutral. We start with the breath. Everything is checked, everything is ticked, every box is ticked, and we start descending, right? The way that we want to start descending is as follows. So we want to imagine like someone has wrapped two ropes. The one rope goes that way, right? So one rope is wrapped from our hips, from our pelvis, and the other rope is wrapped behind our knees. So we essentially have two ropes pulling us at the same exact time. The one begins with our hips going backwards, and the other rope pulls us like this. So essentially we want the hips to break with the knees at the exact same time. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do this. We want them to break at the exact same time. So something like this again. Not this, not this. We want a balance between the two. Now the next step is how should the descent look like? Everything is nice and tight, everything is as it should be. So I want you to pay attention to how my knees are looking. Like given that everything is done accordingly, I want you to pay attention to my knees, the way that they look like, the way that they open in the descent. So, you notice how while I'm descending, while I'm going down, my knees are not like this, are not caving in, are not parallel, are opening for the hips. So we want to make room for our hips to sit, like something like this. And the same thing goes for the ascending. So as we're going up, as we're moving up from the hole, we want to make sure that our knees are not caving in. This is a common mistake that people make, that as they're going up, their knees start to descend. So we want to make sure that the knees remain out and we push out with our knees. We want to push out with our knees and not let them cave, like something like this. We want to do this, okay? This activates our glutes and keeps us strong and powerful throughout the movement. Now, we also want to make sure that the way actually you want to think about the movement is like you're a slingshot. So you are gathering force as you're preparing to go down and descend. You have your breath, everything is becoming really tight, and you will gather all that force, right? You will take your breath in, you will brace your core, go here, and that's when the slingshot starts pulling, right? You're going downwards, descending, and then you are at the hole, right? And this is when you want to be explosive. This is when you want to let go of the slingshot, and it's powerful. The last thing is the lockout. So we want to look from the side on this one, because you want to know how the lockout should look like. The last step. We're in the hole, and then we are explosive going up. This is essentially how the lockout should be, right? So we are here. Let me do it more controlled. You don't want to do this. You definitely don't want to do this. You don't want to bounce. It's really helpful for us to control the weight and not let the gravity control us. So as we're descending, everything is tight. We take control of the movement, and then we explode. If we do this, we let our knees take the whole force and generate the bounce effect. Essentially, our knees do that in our muscles. So we want to make sure that we are controlling the weight. And then the lockout should look something like this. Not like this, not like this here, not like this. We want to make sure that we are locking out with our entire back, legs, glutes, quads, upper back. We want the upper back to be generating force as well. We don't want to be doing this thing right here. We don't want our glutes to be elevating before our leg do. So yeah, make sure that you're taking those steps very, very, very cautiously, step by step. Make sure you nail all those things one by one, and you have successfully mastered your squats. Take care.